One of the most important concepts we need to understand in the social sciences is the concept of a variable. Variables and the relationships between different variables are at the heart of most social science research. So in part one of this two-part series on variables, we will review the definition of the term, and we'll also give examples of variables and the categories that might be used to measure them. The document you see on the screen accompanies the video, and while it will be shown on the screen while I'm discussing it, you also might decide to print a copy out and take notes as we go. There's a brief practice exercise at the bottom of the page that you may actually want to be able to write out, or you can just go over it on the screen. So the definition of a variable is given here, and that is a variable is a characteristic of people, or it might be related to objects or places, it depends on what you're studying, that can be measured by at least two categories. You can kind of stop there. We're going to talk a little bit about this idea of using the term values, but really if you put your period right here and you go by the idea of variable is a characteristic of people or objects or places that can be measured by at least two categories, you're in good shape. I'll go into this idea of categories further as we go along. You may come across slightly different definitions of the term variable, but the key issue is that the characteristic we are measuring has at least two categories. If a characteristic is the same for every participant in a study, for example, if we did a study where all of the participants were 17-year-old foster youth, their age would not be a variable if they are all 17. So in this case, age would be the equivalent of a constant, which is a term you might remember from a previous math class. It doesn't vary across the different participants. They are all 17 years old. Also, the young people's status as foster youth in this hypothetical study I'm discussing would not be a variable because everyone in your study is in foster care. There are not two possible categories. However, if we asked all of the participants how many years they had been in foster care, that would be a variable. It would be a characteristic of the youth, that varies across the different respondents. On the page that accompanies the video, which you can see part of it on the screen here, there are several different examples of variables, and then along with them the categories that might be used to measure each one. These categories are not set in stone, but rather the researcher decides the best way to measure the particular variable so that they have the level of detail that they need. And if, for example, the respondents are filling out a paper survey to select the appropriate categories for themselves, then the researcher has to make sure the categories make sense to the respondent so that they can choose the most accurate one. You can look over the example variables. I won't read them all to you, but I'll go over a couple of them. But for example, hair color, and eye color are not variables that are used by sociologists very often, but they are relatively straightforward examples of what we mean by a variable. If you have several people in a study, let's say you're doing a study with 100 people, one of the variables, one of the characteristics that will vary across these participants is their hair color. They might have black hair or brown hair or blonde hair or red hair, or they might describe their hair with some other color. So those are the categories that describe the variable color of their hair. Same thing with color of eyes. This is not a variable that is used very often in social science research, but it could be, and there are different categories that can be used to describe the color of people's eyes: black, brown, green, blue, hazel, other. So take a moment to read over the other example variables on the page. The rest of them, besides hair color and eye color, the rest of the variables are actually very commonly used in the social sciences. And take a moment, look at the characteristic that's being listed as for the variable, then the categories that are being used. And if you have any questions, be sure and make a note of that and follow up on it with your professor. The problem, with these videos is they're not necessarily, I don't have a built-in way for them to be interactive for you to ask questions of me. This has just been pre-recorded, but you should definitely write any questions down and follow up with your professor. So as you look over those example variables, think about how each one is essentially a characteristic of individual people, and it varies across different folks, right? All of these are measured by appropriate categories, and you can usually picture those categories. Another way to think about this is picturing those categories as a list of possible answers on a survey if the respondent was filling it out. For the variable age, the question might say, how old are you? And then if a list was provided with the choices, under 10 years old, 10 to 15 years, 16 to 20 years old, over 20 years old, the person taking the survey could check the appropriate box. So the question, how old are you, was used to measure the variable age, and the listed choices were the categories that the respondent could choose from. And we would say as researchers, they are the categories we are using to measure age. If we measured the variable age by using the question, how old are you, and then left a blank for the person to fill in their age, we would end up with the categories that are basically just each individual numerical ages, one at a time. And even though these are single numerical values, you can still accurately use the term categories to refer to them. Or sometimes you'll hear them referred to as values, but it means the same thing. So what I have here on the page, each of these numbers now, rather than the categories being a block of possible ages, 10 to 15 years, 16 to 20 years, the category is 4. And people, if we were keeping track of kids' ages, they probably wouldn't be filling the survey out themselves, but if we had a group of kids and we were doing research about them and keeping track of their characteristics, one of those characteristics might be their age. And the first category, if the youngest kid in our study was 4, the first category would be those that are 4 years old. And then the next category would be 5 years old, and then 6 years old, and then 7 years old, etc. And so we would keep track of which kids were 4 years old, 5, etc. Age is again their characteristic. The categories we're keeping track of them, or the categories we're using to measure age in this case, are individual numerical ages, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So you'll see for eye color, hair color, religious affiliation, for those variables, you see the category other listed. And I just want to take a moment to talk about that category. That's an important one to think about if you are the person, especially writing a survey that's going to, that people are going to fill out to give you information about these different variables. It might sometimes bother people to have to check, quote unquote, other for themselves. But the reason we often have to use this category is because it's usually difficult to provide categories that will cover every single person answering the question. We do our best to do this. This is called creating an exhaustive list of categories. But if someone feels that their own eye color, for example, is violet, and that's how they describe their eye color, and we have not provided violet as a category, then that person would mark other. Having other there is a better alternative than someone not finding a category at all that they can mark. And also we realize that we just, we can't list every single possible color sometimes. So religion is another variable that we often use in sociology, and the categories I've provided here are taken from the CIA World Factbook, which is a fairly reliable website that gives information on countries around the world. These religions are listed in order of prevalence globally, again, with other provided because there are literally tens, if not hundreds, of other specific religions that people identify with globally, and it wouldn't be feasible to list them all. So if we were giving a survey in a specific area of the United States, for example, we might not use this same list of religions. We could look up what were the most prevalent religions in that area, and we might have some more specific denominations within Christianity, for example, or within Islam. It would just depend on what part of the country we were in and what the study population was. So I just want you to realize, again, as you look over these examples of a characteristic of individuals and the categories that can be used to measure that characteristic, those categories are going to depend on who the population of people are and what the study is about. So the bottom line is that variables are not cut and dried, but understanding the difference between a variable and the categories that measure a variable is critical. So once you are comfortable with all the different variables that are listed here and understand the difference between the term variable, and you're comfortable with what the different categories are and how that the difference between those terms, you can go down to the bottom of the page, and what you're doing is carefully reading through the sentences, and you're filling in the blanks with either the word variable or categories. And so figure out which one accurately completes the sentence with in each of the blanks, and go ahead and pause the video here, complete the sentences, and then you can turn it back on and I will go over the correct answers. Okay, so I'm going to put the correct answers up. Make sure that you take the time to really understand why each term was the correct one to go in each blank. Don't just quickly check and go, oh good, I got them all right. Like, make sure you really understand why each word was the correct one. So here they are. In a study of 200 people between the ages of 30 and 50, researchers wanted to examine the variable relationship status. So that's kind of the overall term to describe the characteristic of the people, their relationship status. So researchers wanted to examine the variable relationship status, and they used the categories single, casually dating, exclusively dating, and cohabiting or married to measure this concept. Okay, so those are the categories that measured the variable relationship status. Our researcher uses the categories working full-time, working part-time, and unemployed to measure the variable labor force status. So here I just worded the sentence a little differently so that you had to think about it. This time we're leading in with the list of the categories that are measuring the variable labor force status. The researcher later realizes she would have liked to have asked respondents how many jobs they work as well, and she should have included another variable to measure this additional characteristic of the respondent. So that was the big clue. If you weren't sure for that last one what word went in there, you were thinking, well, did she need to add another category? But here we were trying to add an additional characteristic of the respondents, and that's the definition of a variable. So this idea of here we're finding out whether they work full-time, whether they work part-time, whether they're unemployed. But since the distinction here was just like 40 hours or more per week, someone could read that and understand, well, I work 2 jobs and they total 50 hours a week. I'm working full-time, but it's 2 jobs. So the researcher realizes, kind of after gathering this information, that she wishes she would have gotten more detail, and you can do that by having a second variable. And I just really quickly want to show you what that would look like in GSS. Let me throw this up really quick. So here's what I'm talking about in a different way of thinking about it. The variable was labor force status. The categories were whether the person worked full-time, part-time, or was unemployed. And so here the variable is a characteristic that varies across your study participants. Each one has a particular status. We develop categories that will allow all participants to identify one category that best describes their status. So here this person said, okay, I work full-time because I work 40 hours or more. And this person works less than 40 hours a week, so they work part-time. Same thing here, part-time, full-time, and unemployed. So when you're picturing a particular variable, and we're talking about these categories, each person is going to sort of have this designation of fitting into this. In this case, this person fits in the full-time category for the variable labor force status. Okay, so we aren't differentiating whether they work 2 or even 3 part-time jobs to total more than 40 hours per week. If this was an important factor to know about, we could have another variable that measured how many different jobs each respondent has. So this is just a different visual display going over that same concept from the last sentence. And then one last way to look at that, to just connect it to what this would look like in SPSS. In the variable view screen, we have the variable labor force status and then the variable number of jobs. So when I was saying, so this person, let's go back to here, this researcher looked at labor force status, and the way that they did that was they just distinguished full-time, part-time, not in the paid labor force, or unemployed. And then 99 is missing. So these were the 3 categories they used. And then, like I said, they realized, oh, I don't have the detail of whether a person is working 40 or more hours by doing 2 jobs. So when I said that the researcher might want to add a new variable, this is what I mean. This is an entirely separate variable that actually just measures the number of jobs the person has. And so in the data view, this would look like labor force status, one was part-time, one was full-time, two was part-time. I wonder if I can pull this up really quick. So there's labor force status there. Now I can have it on the screen at the same time. So one is full-time, two is part-time, this person is also part-time, this person is not in the paid labor force. So see how this matches up. Here's the variable number of jobs. So now we have the detailed information that this person works full-time and they just have one job. This person is part-time with one job. This person is part-time, but they work two jobs. So they work two different jobs and still work fewer than 40 hours a week. Anybody that's a 3, if we've gathered our information accurately and we have what's called clean data, should have a 0 here. If they're not in the paid labor force, they should have 0 jobs. If we see a mismatch there, we would need to find out, maybe from their survey, if we could clarify which was incorrect. This person is full-time and they have one job. This person is not in the paid labor force. This person is full-time and they have 2 jobs, etc. So that's the idea of there being 2 separate variables. They're both related to the person's work. One is just a quick summary of whether they work full-time or part-time, and the other one gives us more detailed information in terms of how many jobs they work. So that's what this sentence was kind of getting into on the last one. So that's it for this video. The second video related to variables is going to go into independent variables and dependent variables and also units of analysis.